What's up, party people? We are back. John Delarose here, delarose.com. That's DELARROZ.com. And as always, you can go down to the link below, sign up for my newsletter, and get a free graphic novel for your troubles. I also have a link down to a pre-order for a graphic novel called Ever by our friend here, Terry Moore. And I backed this minute one on his website here. And because I didn't want to risk it with all the troubles. There were web troubles on the last one, and it was an interesting time for about a day there. I'm sure that panicked you a lot more than it panicked everybody else.
Yeah, it was a very small doorway with a lot of people trying to get through it.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I just got so you had your art sale last week and kind of did a TerryCon thing, which was very fun. So thank you for doing that.
Good.
And I have never bought a piece of original art from a comic book before, but I did this time. And it's right here. And this is Rachel Rising. And it came yesterday, perfect timing. Page 34, issue 34, page 18. And I bought this one in particular for two reasons. There was no story reason in Rachel Rising. I found that this was, I would say, my most compelling moment in the story or anything like that. But I don't want gruesome horror on my wall to hang up. And so this has no gruesome horror in it, which there's very few pages of that in this story. And number two, down here, the little joke is Lilith, who is kind of Rachel's enemy at this point, is she's like, oh, I just invited myself in for tea. And my wife is an avid tea drinker. She's one of those people who like buys subscriptions to, exotic teas and things like that. So I knew I could get her sign off on this because of that also. So that was a good thing.
I've actually hidden 3 different horror scenes in that page that don't show, but if you've read the story, you recognize 3 locations in that backyard where you've seen things happen.
The dumpster where Zoe was lighting on fire is one.
Yeah, what was she lighting in there? I forget.
What was it? It was was it a body?
It was rats.
Rats. That's right. That's right. And I just read this last week because my memory's shot.
And then there's that window on the right-hand side of the back of the house. That corner window is the bedroom window for Rachel's room.
Okay.
So that makes me think of the scenes that happened in there. And then that back step there by the door is where Rachel and Jet have sat in the cold and first talked about, how you learn that they're friends from when they're kids and now what do we do now with these problems. So there's a lot of stuff. Well, is that backyard, they use that backyard a lot.
Yeah, that backyard appears in a lot of scenes, and I love your background scenery so much. I think you do such a great job and such a detailed job of that it just makes everything pop so much, and very much appreciate it. So cool.
That house is actually I drew it after a house that my wife and I first lived in back in Dallas, Texas. We had a small red house with a backyard that was not very attractive, and that house, I used that house for that. The front of the house looks better, but the back of the house is the same, and I use it as my model in my head.
Nice. Well, that's a cool story. So you think about every panel in that amount of detail. That's something I don't do. I'm a big picture type of person. I just, of course, I don't draw my own, so it's kind of a different story. But I always just think of like, okay, artist guy, draw the fight, right?
Yeah.
And that's about as far detail as I get. I've seen some of Alan Moore's scripts, and of course, each panel's like as far as detail goes. But I don't know. Have you always trained yourself that way, or over time did you kind of develop, I guess, a detailed sense about things, or what is it?
To put it simply, the big picture is everybody falls down and go boom. But then I have a lot of fun in explaining why each individual person fell down and went boom. And so I have a lot of fun explaining why the boom, where the boom came from, who that person, why they were the first to fall, why this one fell because that one fell. I just like all that,
Yeah.
I'm a big why person, which is I always had the feeling in my writing that the more you know, the more you care, whether it's about a person or whatever sequence, a historical sequence. So I did anyway. I get more empathetic if I know more. So I kind of
I
like
agree with that. And somebody called me last night. He was a friend of mine. Was like, I want to write a movie script, and he has this whole idea about corporations going and assassinating their pensioners so they don't have to pay out, basically. And I'm like, ooh, that's pretty subversive and interesting, and I like it. But he was talking about it, like, he's like, I've never written anything before. What do you suggest? I said, have a detail or something about your main character, like he's really into eating wheat thins or something. Like,
Yeah.
and you think that's like kind of silly, but like if you drill in a couple of details like that, just like you said, like you feel like it's more of a real person, because we all have our weird idiosyncrasies like that, right?
That's
Yeah.
why Columbo drove a nasty little car that he was very loyal to. You know, he always had car trouble, but he was babying the car along. You know, and he had his coat and his little ticks as a person. Always, oh, one more thing. Yeah, that's why you give those guys those ticks and things. So, yeah, it helps you relate to the person, and then they become more. If you can relate to them, they become more of your avatar in the story. This guy is talking for me. That's what I would have said. That's what I would
Right.
have done. If I was doing that story of your friends, you could have, instead of assassinating them, you put something in the product or a competitor's product or something so that they're assassinating themselves if they use it. And then the hero is the investigator that comes in to find out what the hell is going on.
That's interesting twist. I thought about that too. I'm like, that, you know, that you
did it to yourself. I did. I had nothing to do with it.
Right. Having the investigator kind of be the protagonist, that was my first thought also, but he wants to do this, and you know, his way, and that's fine. We all have different ideas, and that's what makes art interesting.
It's like the action hero point of view, where his whole family is wiped out, and now he's on a mission.
That's awesome. Oh man, funny stuff. So I just finished rereading this tome last night, which we did the last what was it, 6 issues, I think, and really entertaining stuff. And now I see your comment that says for some reason you can't hear me. Okay. Oh well. Interesting. So I noticed in this you have a couple of like issues where you kind of reset the stage and kind of inform the reader again what's going on. And you know, I guess in a long form like this, you gotta kind of do that periodically to give people a jumping on point. Has comics changed at all? In fact, like, because I noticed you've also shifted the way you do things to these sort of 10-issue mini maxi series, whatever you want to call them. Do you think comics has changed to where people are not just jumping on as much if they see issue 35 because they just don't even want to start there, or how does that change your writing, I guess?
I think people treat the comics the same way they do TV shows. So if you hear a lot about a TV show, but they're in their 3rd season, you think about, well, I need to go back and start from the beginning, otherwise I won't know what's going on. And so people have that attitude towards a long streaming story, and take the same approach towards a comic. The only people who get a pass at that is, you know, the big DC titles that have high numbers. You just grab one when you find one, but then you hear that there's arcs, and then you look for the trade of that arc, which is like trying to buy a DVD of the first season or something, or whatever. So yeah, I think the mentality is different. We've switched from I don't know, more of a strictly reader mentality to more of a, you know, lump it all in together as my entertainment medias. So
That's true.
Whether it's, you know, whatever it is, you want to try to start from the beginning. If you decide you like it, you go from the beginning.
It's kind of weird because I'm a big Star Trek fan, and, you know, growing up in the 90s, I mean, I just found Deep Space Nine kind of around season 3, and I didn't just stress over finding season 1 and 2 or anything. I just watched it when it was on, and there's nothing else I could do about it. And
Exactly.
it didn't actually bother. It didn't actually even cause a problem to my watching experience. And then when I went back and watched season 1 and 2 later as an adult, I was like, oh, those seasons weren't good. I was I didn't really miss out so much. So it was kind of interesting.
You know, when I started in the early 90s, it was a different world, completely different planet. And there wasn't really a lot of trade paperbacks at all. There were these books that came, these albums that came, collect stories that came from Europe or Japan, but America wasn't. They were all about, it was more about the single issue life, collectabilities and things like that. And if you had a whole run, good for you. And I remember it as we started trades because the indie books, like I was involved in, were impossible to find once you missed the boat. If it was year 2 for me and you were trying to find my year 1 comics, it was impossible because they weren't at the store. The store had only bought 2 to begin with. So there was never anything in the box or on the wall.
And there was no real like eBay at the time or anything like that either. Yeah.
So in order for you to see my story or read what was already long gone, we started emulating the Europeans and the Japanese and making these trades. And we did it just in the indie world for a couple of years before we started seeing the big guys start doing it too. And then they would sell huge runs of like Spider-Man or back the old stuff. They sold the old stuff first and got it out of the way. And you could finally buy like all of Ditko's Spider-Man in 3 volumes or something like that. And then they caught up and started doing their newer stuff. And now, you just feel like trade paperbacks have been here since Adam and Eve, but it's not the case at all.
I've noticed a lot of people are actually building their arcs to omnibus size now instead of actually even writing to a trade for 6 issues or whatever it is. You see people like Jonathan Hickman or whatever, they've got this like master arc where it's going to be 3 omnibuses long or whatever. And it's like, wow, it's a very different mentality, but it is also really cool.
It's Lord of the Rings mentality. I'm going to make an epic.
Right. Yeah.
I never deliberately tried that. I just accidentally did it.
Right. I've heard a few interviews with you over the years, and you kind of just like go right and then kind of figure it out as you go along. Right. It's the opposite mentality for me. It's very interesting.
Yeah. I'm just a puppy off a leash, and I get excited about a story and I just go with it and see how far I get. You did mention that I'm doing these 10 issue arcs, and that is because of the times where if I go longer than that, I can't find the support I need to keep doing the singles.
Like issue 11 and 12 just kind of start to dip and all that, and that's the tipping point, huh?
It starts at issue 2, and then by 10, I'm doing 10 for free, just to finish the series. So everybody waits to see if they're going to like it, and then a few people finish out the run, and then a lot of people stop after a couple of issues, and they say, "Okay, that's good. I'm gonna read the trade when it comes out, or the omnibus." So there are trade waiters, and now there's omnibus waiters.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So a trade waiter, I only see them once a year, and an omnibus waiter, I would only see them once every 3 to 10 years.
Right.
So that's a very long time between seeing your customer.
It's a big difference, because I would say that the state of the industry maybe 5 years ago was people would buy the issues, and they still would. And then they'd buy the trade again, and then they'd even buy the omnibus. And there's people who do that still, but I think that was kind of more the norm. And I think you're right that there's been a shift in the way that's been going on. As far as what I do these days, I release a trade, and then I go back and I put out issues digitally, because digital price points are impulse buys. And I figure like people want to buy a trade and read the whole thing, and the issues really are tough to make money on print wise at this point. And so digitally that way goes through. So it's an experiment, but we're in a weird time to where I think there's big shifts happening, especially, with what happened with COVID and all that, and distribution now going like this. I saw what happened with that in the 90s, and it got real ugly for the comic industry, and we're doing something else now.
Yeah. I feel digital has saved me. If
It
I was
has.
relying
Cool.
strictly on print, I'd be hurting. Digital has helped a lot. It's helped fill the hole. It's not even, but it's not even 50% of my business yet still. And you would think it would be by now, but it's not. So it's not the powerhouse that I always wished it would be for me, but it is important. And I think it's a foundation for the future. One of the things that people have said thank you for on my digital is that it doesn't have any locks on it. So
That's
um,
nice.
it doesn't have that DM thing or whatever. Um, so it's easier. That's kind of playing a long game as well, where I'm hoping that even if it is getting passed around, at least it's spreading the footprint so that this book is getting more and more aware. I think it's digital is the reason why I have readers in very obscure locations around the globe, you know, because they're all sharing the same culture digitally. When it was print, we were all in our little camps. Now that it's digital, we all get the same release day. You can be in Russia or you can be in Cincinnati. It doesn't matter.
Interesting. That's a good thing. One thing I've found on the indie side is it's really hard to get people discussing indie books like they do the big two Marvel and DC books. Like no matter what comes out, you'll just see so much discussion about whatever Batman is, cooking for breakfast today, right?
Yeah.
But then you try to get like even like a single review out of an indie comic, especially after the number 1 or number 2 issue, like you mentioned, it's really tough. Do you just let it fly and hope people do it, or do you have a process where you try to push that a little?
I try to squawk like as much as I can. I am one small animal in a big jungle, so to speak. So sometimes I'm just keeping my head down for survival. I just keep making my book, which is the first piece of advice everybody always gets or gives. Just keep making your book. But the other times, I really am aware that I am like that little bird on top of the hippopotamus. I really the hippo is why we're all here at the zoo, not for the little bird. And I'm the little guy riding this big behemoth that is DC, Marvel. The business is here because of them. I understand that. So you have to, of course, the chat's going to be about them primarily, but and there was a long period in my life, when I was growing up, where all I focused on was those 2 books.
Yeah,
And
me too.
it wasn't until I was in high school that I even discovered all the other kind of cartoonists, and then I was off and running on that track. So you have to let people have their process. They have to be into whatever book brought them to the genre first, and let them enjoy it. And then when they're ready for something different, be there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that is really the only way to do things. It's interesting. I found you in 2000, I think 8 or 9, and I saw some Echo trades. Just kind of, I think they were at the discount at that point, and I'm like, this is some pretty art. What's going on with this? And so I picked one up, and I very much enjoyed Echo a lot. And then read through to the end, and I think the issues were still coming out at that point, so there were a couple more left, and I got to get in on the tail end of that, and that's pretty nice. And that was really your take on, I guess, superheroes in a way, sorta. Everything I talk about you with, it's always, well, this is his take on horror, sorta.
That's my trick,
right?
Yeah, Echo was one of those things where I wanted to do something fantastic, with the capital THE, and you like you said, the art catches people live, but the story makes them stay. So you have to get that balance. And I wanted to do a story, not my version of Iron Man, but it's fantastic and this incredible stuff happens, but it's actually has more of a, I don't want to say spiritual, but it has more to do with Einstein's universe as opposed to, let's pretend I can smash a building for no reason whatsoever. Oh, gamma rays or whatever, just
Right.
like a 1940s excuse. But I wanted to have something with more of a bedrock of, again, back to the why. Why would somebody have all that stuff on their body?
Hmm.
Why does it work? Why can you not do this with them or that with them? So the whole story is about all that. And it actually goes back, there's an undercurrent theme through the entire story, which is why have we taken something like atomic power and gone the route we've gone with it instead of what we promised? We promised clean
Right.
energy, and now we've ended up with the ultimate weapon, and we're destroying.
It's and then we're not even using it for clean energy, hardly. It's like, it's too
Right.
bad. That drives me crazy, but that's a rant I could go on for 20 minutes.
We could make a whole novel out of that.
Yeah, that is definitely that is seen in there. Now I do have omnibus collector groups around me because that's the scene I'm in. And I've gotten asked at least 5 times since I told people we were going to do this interview that is the Echo hardcover going to get reprinted at some point?
Yes, at some point, yes. And I don't want to jinx it, but um, Echo in Hollywood is on a good track.
Yes. Oh, that's great.
It's just got a lot of positive energy right now. I'm feeling really good about it. Usually it just goes out there and goes into option hell and is ignored. That's not happening.
That happened with Rachel Rising, right? Because I remember some talk about that a while back.
Rachel has some momentum, and Echo has momentum. Those are the two that have momentum right now. So I'm having my fingers crossed. And if either one of those ever got to screen, I would reprint their hardcovers.
Yeah, of course. Cool. Well, I hope that happens for you. That'd be amazing.
I got everything crossed.
Yeah, you always see weird properties show up, and it's like I remember when iZombie got on TV, and I was like, I love iZombie because Michael Allred does just the most amazing cool art. But I was just shocked that it's like this is what they picked. It's like this is that's kind of odd, and they went a very different direction with TV show than they did with the book, but it's cool and it can happen, and it's our collective willpower which makes it happen. So we can sit here and go yes and do that.
It's amazing the stories I've read about that.
I'm not joking.
No, there was an entire group of doctors in San Francisco, and they coordinated a mass prayer, even though many or most of them did not pray for anything. They coordinated a mass prayer or whatever goodwill moment for a patient, and the patient turned around on their thing, and they always, that was several years back, and they've always been wondering, do you think that worked?
Yeah, and you can't prove it. Yeah,
you can't prove it, but that was weird. So yeah, I don't know. I think the thing about Echo and Rachel, when I talk about spiritual, I'm talking about we do have a lot of energy in us. We're just a collection of
right,
cork stuff,
moving stuff. Yeah,
there's a lot of fire going on in there, and it's easy to make a case for you have a little more ability than you're using, like your brain. And so, if you got a bunch of people together and they focused and there was some sort of prismatic focus on something, maybe you have some effect on something. I don't know. It's one of those things that we never think about. And I think about it when I'm writing stories like Echo or Rachel. I try to think about the inner stories too, the subliminal stuff, the stuff we don't see, but it's there. Just because you see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Like all the neutrinos that are bombarding the Earth right now from space, and they're going through us, and that's happening. But we never think about it. Maybe if we all said comics at the same time, we could, stop the neutrinos for a minute or something. Who knows?
Yeah, and that's what like solidified my Terry Moore super fandom was I liked Echo, but I went to 2012 Comic Con, I feel like it was. And I was like, I like Echo, and Rachel Rising is coming out or whatever. So I'll roll in here and listen to what this guy has to say. And I walked in there, and I'm going to get weird. So sorry about this. But I walked in there and I started listening, and just as you're talking and kind of brain dumping, your thoughts at the time, and how, you were nervous about Rachel Rising, you said, because it was like a dark space, and you don't necessarily like the dark space, which I very much relate to. Also, I gravitate towards a lot. I'd almost rather read Betty and Me. But I started feeling that, and there was like an energy in the room, and I did feel like this like spiritual sense and you were talking about spirituality and all the stars in the sky and all that. And I was like, okay, this is a guy who's on a different level of like understanding. And this is why I appreciate the art, because you're connecting to something a little deeper in the universe, I feel like. And you probably don't like to talk about that because it's kind of egocentric to say it yourself, but I feel like that's there. And that's very rare. It's something I don't see. I don't see people striving for it a lot of the time. I feel like people are try to be like, what is product that will sell? And when you're in that mode, it's almost like you got the disconnection, right? Yeah. So I don't know. Did you grow up that way? Like what brought you this like spiritual sense that you're thinking about these things? Your parents?
Well, my upbringing, maybe.
Yeah.
I was brought up in the church, and then I was always asking why. How does that work? And the answer was always just because. But nobody ever answered my why questions. And then finally, when I was older, I was able to listen to lectures from scientists who had started off as atheists who converted themselves by trying to disprove the Bible. And so they would have these lecture tours. Here's a scientific look at all this stuff and how it would work. Here's how I think it all fits together with science and what you're reading. And so I read all that, and I listened to all that and everything, and I was fascinated.
I've always been fascinated in reading those too. It's like in watching those, because it's like I'm glad somebody's actually paying attention to that. It's
somebody, at least somebody besides your grandmother who says just have faith.
Right.
The scientist comes along and says, well, nowhere, it takes thousands of years before anybody mentions fresh water at the bottom of the sea, but it's here in this old chapter. How could they have known that without enlightened help writing? All that kind of stuff. So you listen to all that, you take it all in. But I still, I read all these science books and philosophy and earth sciences and astrology, and listened to all of the Stephen Hawking's recordings and things like that. And you just develop this huge why. How is all this working? There's just so much going on, and I'm seeing like that much of it. But there's all this support system going on. And once you start thinking about that, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I was thinking about, the first time it really came out in my writing was when I was doing Gen 13. I had to do a little run of that. And I came up with a villain for them that was a college professor. And he was time skipping. And instead of just saying, oh, I just hit a button on my wrist or whatever, my premise was that I had just been reading or listening to Stephen Hawking and talking about decay, that the universe was, slowly atomic decay numbers. So I had this theory that because when I was working in television as an editor, there are 30 frames per second. So every frame of video has its own number from second to minute to hour and more. So you had a number for every single second in time. And I put it together with Stephen Hawking and said, there's also a number assignment to the atomic decay in the universe. So as the number grows bigger, as time goes on, the number grows bigger. If you could change your atomic decay order inside your body and reduce it and back your number up, you would have to go back to where you belong, and you can time skip backwards to.
That's cool.
If you change your number by a day, you can go back. You go back a day to where you belong. You can't be in a spot where you don't belong. And that's how he was time jumping back and forth. He had some ability, some way, he figured out some way to change his internal decay number. It's still bullshit, but at least it's not a button on your wrist.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you get into quantum mechanics and all that stuff. You get into it and you're like, okay, well then there's the little quarks and all that, and it's like, well, what's beyond that? Well, then there's the little and it's like, well, what's beyond that? And eventually it's like faith,
Yeah.
Right?
What? At the very bottom, I read one of the quark guys. He said at the very bottom, in all of it in the universe is a plank, and on the plank, this massive plank that's what they call it, is just positive negatives popping up, and they're just doing that by the trillions, zillions until something connects and gets enough of the positives to make a neutrino or whatever, and then that drifts off, and then they keep popping until they make a proton or whatever. That's just as bullshit as my time skipping.
That's a pretty good science fiction story right there.
I know. That's an actual paper that has gone through a university. So
wow.
I know. So hey, I say when you get to a certain point where they're all just standing up and saying, I guess it's something like this. So why not listen to the sci-fi writer too?
Yeah.
They have actually, sci-fi writers have a pretty good batting average.
Yeah, that's very true. So if you look back just to where a lot of things developed, I mean, you got a lot of technology out of Arthur C. Clarke or Isaac Asimov's ideas, and I mean Heinlein obviously pushed a lot as well. So I mean we got an interesting background here, and that's what I primarily do is I write sci-fi novels because it's easier than corralling those artist guys. You guys always want to go off and do your own thing. But
I think my favorite genre is sci-fi novelists. I adored Heinlein and those guys, and I think that their job is to spend a lot of extra time thinking about us and where we're ultimately going with all this. So they're like the scouts who look up far ahead and see where all this is going to end up if we keep going this way. Like Dr. Fauci is predicting us 3 months out, but a sci-fi guy predicts us 100 years out or 50 years. And they do it with culture and technology, everything. And it's just fascinating. And some of the scouts had really good handle on how that stuff worked. Like Heinlein, he was a mathematician. He could do all the math on these ideas. And he and his wife would figure it out first before he'd write it down. So I have a lot of admiration for those guys.
It was neat. I know a lot of that happened, and a lot of course, a lot of the 50s and 60s centered on the year 2000. And I talk to a lot of people in science fiction circles now, and it seems like just because of this scope, and they kind of saw how all that came to pass, and everybody went to the year 2000, and then there weren't flying cars and stuff all the way around. And so they these days, a lot of people are hesitant about projecting futures like 10 years out or 20 years out because they're like, it's not going to stand the test of time. And so I'm just going to set mine 3,000 years from now because nobody's going to be able to question that.
Yeah. I think it is a very risky thing,
Yeah.
What can be really risky though is if you listen too much to everybody else. At some point, you have. I've heard this is kind of weird, but if we're talking about like a bunch of Greek philosophers sitting around, it's like I've heard the common opinions. I know what that section of town thinks. I know what that town thinks. I know what that. So what they're all looking for at this point is somebody that is thinking for themselves, and they went out and had a Zen moment in the desert or whatever, and they come back and they say, you know what? I actually don't think any of that's going to happen. I think it's going to be this. And that's fascinating when you get someone who's really, but when you read it or hear it, you think, oh, that's resonating with me. that sounds like, that feels, wow.
It's a talent, and I think artists and writers tap into that a lot too. And I talk about it in a way that freaks people out sometimes because certain words freak people out. And I always say I think it's a gift of prophecy in a way when you have that drilled in. This is what we talk about when we talk about prophecy, and it's very easy to be because I guess in our modern culture we tie prophets to some guy saying the end of the world's coming next year and then it didn't happen, and it's a negative thing. But that cultural job, I think, is where the artistic expressions go, and that's why I'm so interested in it, because it is something forward thinking, and I like that.
It's an extremely legitimate stone to stand upon when you think you have something to say. Because if you think about it, all the scientists they build a case and then they make a prophetic projection based on the facts they have.
Yeah.
And your doctor gets the facts, as many facts as he can, then he makes a prophecy about where he thinks this is heading, depending on what he's seen it do before. So it's an educated prophetic statement or whatever. So it's not like you just made shit up and just
right.
Mouth. There's a lot to it. And it's amazing how many people will say, well, that sounds right, but I never have spent the time to think of it myself. And, there are a lot of people that just live in the now. I only deal with what I can see and touch. And if you want to think about all the invisible stuff and then tell me about it, I'll listen to you. There's some of that to it, people know that there's air, but they don't think about it. So when you talk about, stuff stays in the air. And the reason why we really should be wearing masks for this COVID stuff is, like, has anybody ever walked in front of you and you can smell their fart?
Right.
Treat that like COVID. If you can smell their fart, that's COVID. So it's like that. So see, that stuff's in the air. You can't see it, but it's there, So
I was early on, and people actually made fun of me quite a bit because when it first started dropping, before everybody got locked down and all that, I bought painter's smoke goggles because you can get in through the eye, and I bought a bunch of N95 masks because the N95 filters that that to the nth degree better than of course any sort of this doesn't do that much comparatively, right? And I'm like, I'm not, and I got plastic gloves, and I would wear a sweatshirt full time, so I had and a hat, so my hair wasn't exposed, body wasn't exposed, and of course the other thing that people don't think about is you want to take those things off before you get into your home or whatever, and I would leave them outside, and I had a bottle of Clorox to spray it. If you want to take it fully and really be actually safe, I mean that's more of a military approach to doing things. But odds are you're not going to get a virus if you're doing that,
But people who come into your house, the medical crew that comes into your house to clean it up after everybody in your house has caught it, they would be having all that on.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So
and then strip all of it off, all the clothes off outside.
Yeah.
Especially, I think shoes is a big one, and what it really made me appreciate is, I'm in California, so I have a lot of Asian friends, Asian culture, and you always take shoes off when you go into one of their houses. And as I thought about just like how dirty the bottom of shoes get, just because you're walking everywhere, that's a really great best practice just for health. So yeah,
everything you ever transport on your body eventually ends up on the ground.
I know.
That bottom of the shoe is bad.
Yeah.
I saw a thing on 60 Minutes the other day about a lady who was doing this stuff where they have to really cover up. And she said the most dangerous part is when you take it off. That's when they have to train people, don't pull it up.
Do it correctly. Yeah.
So taking it off is tricky.
It is. Yeah. And if you miss there, oh, well.
Yeah.
So that's that. Not to scare everybody who watches this.
Okay, we talked about every scary thing there is. There's nothing left except the bomb.
We've hit like the bottoms of the universe, God, atomic energy. Oh my gosh.
Half have yet to mention the Dodgers. I mean, that's just weird.
Oh, I don't want to get depressed. So, so it really bothers me to my core that not only the Dodgers won, but the Lakers also won. It's like, this isn't, this is a bad year for sports. So
what bothers me is that all happened and I didn't even know it.
Right.
I'm so off my timing.
Yeah, well, the seasons weren't really there, so that's what happened. Weird times. All right, the one thing we really haven't talked about, which I think is super important, is this. It's called Ever, and you just put up the hardcover, which you're selling directly, and I'm going to put the link in the chat for folk who are here. And I just, when I see your hardcover go up, I just buy it sight unseen. I didn't even look at what it was. I just say Terry Moore, click. So what's the story about it? It looks like another. So Rachel Rising has a sort of doomsday apocalypse, and this has that vibe also.
It's not going to surprise you at all to find out that it, from our conversation so far, that it has a bit of taps into everything we talked about.
Okay.
Because I wasn't done thinking about it. It's Ever is a 17-year-old girl who is on the verge of her 18th birthday, and she's visited by an angel who explains that when she turns 18, she actually becomes the 666 combination that can be presented to the beast guarding the pit of darkness, which is holding
when that happens.
Yeah. What are you going to do? And so all the sinful angels are in the pit of darkness after they were marrying humans, and they've been there all this time, and she can get them out of there. When she finds out that she's actually the key, she doesn't want to be the key. So it's about the great debate she has with the angel and all the history behind it and the history behind her. It turns out there's way more to her than she realized. And so you kind of get sucked into the story on just a very simple level, and then you fall down the rabbit hole. I hope people like it. I really had fun.
Are there preview pages on here now?
I have a preview page in my head.
Okay, so we'll throw you on here. How do we do this? There we go. Awesome. Exclusive preview page. Breaking news.
They're right here. It's so funny you mentioned this because I actually have the book right here.
The whole book.
It's heavy.
Nice. I really just got
I really like those page. This is a good page.
You're showing me blank pages, sir. I can see this.
I'm sorry. The art's on the other side.
Oh, beautiful. That's exciting stuff. So just like the rain, that is how I would react if I was standing there in the rain too, just without the dialogue or the story context.
What is going on?
I don't like getting soaked.
Here she is in the pit of darkness.
Oh, nice.
Spoiler, she goes to the pit of darkness.
All right.
So you can see all the angels in there. They've lost the stuffings on their wings.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it's just one of those stories that I just kind of had a lot of fun with. Everything is a metaphor for something else and all that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for this. And the actual books are going to be coming out in November. Is that right?
Yes, mid-November. So like in 2 weeks, maybe a little more.
Awesome.
There's the soft cover for retail shops. And then our website is selling a hardcover, and that's how we pay for the print run for everything is our Abstract Studio version. That's what those are for. We always make an Abstract Studio version, and that's what they're for.
Highly recommend hardcovers personally, because I'm into that. There's only 287 of these left, and I don't know how long these will be here, so I would grab these, because what invariably happens with these hardcover books is they end up absurd prices. If you wanted to get this bad boy right here, or bad girl, whatever you want to call it, Rachel Rising, I mean, these are going for about $250 on eBay at this point. It's pretty crazy. So You can speculate on Terry Moore. It's better than Bitcoin. So.
Yeah. and you won't end up in jail.
Right. Awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. And of course, I'm looking forward to Serial because Zoe's such a, I don't want to say fun character because that shouldn't be fun. Evil. I don't know.
I know.
What's the word you use to describe Zoe?
Unusual.
No.
She's a very sweet girl. Yeah.
Very sweet girl.
Very sweet, darling child. Yeah. Zoe came from, because my way of handling horror was to poke fun at it, like Halloween movies or something like that. I would satirize it. And my satire side did the same thing with Lizzie Borden one time. I drew about 4 or 5 strips of Lizzie Borden at home, as a boiling kettle. She's just one more word away from just snapping. And I treated it like Mad Magazine, and it made me giggle. So a few years later, I was doing Rachel, and I needed a small town that was creepy, like would be in any Halloween movie. But instead of typecasting and getting the usual big, weird guy to be the most dangerous person in town, I decided it should be a 10-year-old girl. Just like when you go into the ocean, the prettiest stuff is the most deadly,
Right.
Wildlife.
They got the poison.
That's how it should be,
I thought it was neat because so many horror films use children in a creepy manner, right? And I thought just from the horror vibe of that, you look at The Shining or whatever, right? And you got the creepy children and all that, and it very much fit in the genre tropes on that level when I looked at it. Yeah,
it's the Shining, but also The Kid Who Could See Dead People.
Oh yeah, that.
That's one of the ones that really sticks with me, and it's I don't know, it's a weird thing. I've had a habit in my stories of having people who are typically victims come out on top in my stories. That again may just be my empathy for the human race and the struggle and why people keep trying, and I'm always pulling for them, So I
like that a lot. I'm sorry to cut you off on that, but I really like that a lot about your characters, and because I feel like there's so much societal pressure for victims to just say they're victims and give up all the time, and I really like a message where it's like, you've got this and you can overcome it, and there is hope, and that really is very important to the human condition, at least to me. So
that was the undercurrent for my first book, Strangers in Paradise. And then when I went into these other genres, I kept the same undercurrent, that no matter what the problem was, you had hope of getting on the other side of it, whether it was the problems in Echo or Rachel or whatever. Because if there's no hope, then and I've seen stories in movies and TV shows where there is no hope, and
The Walking Dead.
Specific themes may be enchanting, but when you watch, you get into it, and you're watching it, and you realize there's no hope in the story, probably because the writer doesn't believe in anything.
Right.
So the writer doesn't know where you would find hope.
I always think about that, and that twists my heart so much every time I think about that. It really does.
Yeah, and they can be good writers. The scenes could be very charming and magical, but there's no point to them. And ultimately, after you've watched about 6 of those, you think, where are we going?
Yeah.
What is your point? And ultimately, their point is going to be, we'll never know. We'll never understand. We'll just go until we die, and then somebody else will get mystified. And I'm thinking, I'm out.
So that's called nihilism, folks. So,
yeah. In the favor of the Spartans.
Sorry, I distracted your thought on Zoe here and took you off.
Zoe who? Out of sight, out of mind.
Nice. What do you think? So title wise, so Ever is probably the name of the gal. In Ever?
Ever short for Everly. And there's a reason why I refer to her as Ever. It all just kind of works together. It's like I try to write. I was so impressed with things like by Lewis Carroll, where everything meant something and it all ties
Right.
together. And so when I do my stories, I try to make it so that there's a reason why this would work, or her name is that, or they go there, or there's a reason why you see this poster on page 2, and then there's a scene of it later and all that, so I try to have that stuff there for the second and third read. The first
That's
read,
great.
you're just reading the story on the top. And then
Right.
the second read and third read, you're looking for subtext and connections that you may have missed, and I want them to be there. I
That's great.
really believe in subliminal advertising. If I could take the time to draw faces in the ice cubes of whiskey glasses, I would. So I do pack in all that little stuff that I can, as much as time will allow.
I do it too. I've got a friend who manages a short science fiction magazine, and of course, short science fiction magazines don't sell as well as they used to. And so, in the next graphic novel I'm doing, I just have the character sitting there reading that science fiction magazine while the apocalypse stuff is going on around him, and the girl tries to drag him out of there and says, "What are you doing? I mean, we've got so much." And he's like, "Look, if I can't take time for quality science fiction, what's the point?"
That is exactly right. I couldn't agree more. And in many ways, that's exactly what we're doing tonight when we watch TV.
Exactly.
As the world burns, here we are. There's a lot of self-comfort going on with all of our entertainment, I think. And so it's nice if some of it can be thoughtful and make allusions to real life, and maybe cast a little light on something. That's good.
Yeah. I've noticed a trend over the last 30, maybe since the 80s, I guess, to like that the culture just keeps getting darker and darker and darker in that, though. And that always surprises me, because I think, especially when you're sitting here in a like pandemic where you're locked up at home and disconnected from people. And I think we've seen via social media how that stress and the disconnection is just really sown a lot of hate between people, which doesn't need to be here. And I hope it goes away as soon as we come out of this. It seems like I guarantee it's the locked up at home and disconnected that's causing it. Like, why would it continue to get more dark? Like, I mean, when I want to watch something at home now, it's like, I definitely don't want to watch the movie Pandemic. It's like, I'm surprised there hasn't been a push towards just something lighter and optimistic because of that in just the cultural writing.
Our entertainment tends to be the opposite of what our social climate is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, like, we don't really make a lot of dark entertainment unless the climate is happy enough to take it. Sometimes and then sometimes we'll just be right on target. Some of it is right on target. Like when you think about those, I don't know. When I look back at the decades that I've been alive, each decade had a different identity and a different tone to it, and it really reflected the America at large. And then America was bouncing off of the world. But if I just focus on America, I've lived in so many different Americas. It's really changed. And what I really noticed, if you can make the case, of course, if you know anything about American history, that some things have always been this way, that our leaders were always in danger. Everything we stood for was in danger at all times. And then we like the presidents that keep them safe for their tenure. But when we started, there was a period there, like in the 70s, where everything was, can I cuss? I don't know if I can say bad words, but
yeah, sure.
The entire 70s was, oh, well, what the fuck? Let's just get high and screw. And that came as part of, like, we're just tearing everything down.
Yeah.
That wasn't important. That wasn't important. Nixon let us down. So clearly the White House is for sale. Da, 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 da. And we just started pulling down all the things that we used to have a little bit of, well, we can't do that because the teaching stone in the middle of the town square says don't do it. So if we knock the teaching stone over, then there's no reason to, you've knocked down whatever rules we set up for community. So I think we've knocked down a lot of community rules and standards in the last 50 years. And when you do that, you just kind of have to reboot. And I think we're getting a lot of rebooting where people are saying, well, you know what, where we're at it, that person's no better than me. So I've lost respect for that, and that, or I've seen too many stories now because we don't just get news on our city, we get news about the entire world.
Right.
I know about everybody that's walked into a church and been stabbed to death in France. Whereas if I only knew the news in my neighborhood, that has never happened here yet.
Right.
So I've lost my shields and my protection and my bubble and all that stuff. And now when I look at a cathedral, I think about stabbings. I don't think about, good past history associations, I think about now. Or if you think about flirting and sex and all that, now I think about everybody's Me Too story and how terrible it all is.
Right. It's I'm glad I don't have to deal with this dating environment. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. People are dealing with predators and they're sick of it. But I remember a decade when anything goes. Yeah. All these old men came from the anything goes era. And
how old are you? Is it okay? Is it okay to ask?
No. You look at any movie made in the 70s and everybody's hands all over everybody. And that was the time, So everything's changed. But a lot of it is for a good reason. Racism, respect, don't pick on people, don't bully people, don't make fun of people because they're gay or whatever their identity is. So I think we're headed towards, in one way, we're getting a lot more understanding and compassion. But on the other hand, we've also kind of kicked to the curb a lot of things that kind of were the fences alongside the road. So we're all off-road. We're all making new roads. We're all making new community standards. And
I really like, and I've kind of taken that idea also when you talk about just like we see everything in every aspect of the world at all times. It's overwhelming for sure. And I've made a conscious effort, one, to just not watch the news ever. I think that's a good thing for anybody's peace of mind. But number two is actually to really put a focus on localism, and just like, in the pandemic, it's like you couldn't hang out with anybody. So we'd get out in the middle of the street and just set up lawn chairs and talk across the street from one another.
That's great.
And that feels good. And that's how you forge real connections and real relationships that go a lot deeper than Twitter.
Yes.
Yes.
You from your neighbors and your friends, the ones you can actually talk to, you can get, you as a person physically need to connect with other people.
Right.
And you don't get that from Twitter. Twitter is where your ego goes to die.
Yeah, I call it hell because I always and I'm pretty active in the church, and I always saw going in with church. It's like the whole point of this is the community is kind of getting together and we're hanging out. And now it's a little tough because you're making online services. So you're not really providing you're providing the same function as this YouTube chat. It's an interview or a talk on something, which is a YouTube chat. And so that really hurts the churches a lot because you don't have that community, and that is the function there. And Twitter is, to me, because it is, especially, I think what I would love for them to remove and hate for them to remove at the same time is the quote tweet. Because it encouraged everybody to just gotcha zinger all the time. And it's an ultimate disconnection of people where it's just like, I dislike you and you're dumb. And taking that attitude, you would never do that in person with somebody. Mm-hmm. And as we've now isolated ourselves, that's exacerbated things. So Twitter is separation from people, which equates to separation from God, in my opinion, and is actually what hell is Twitter.
Can you throw Facebook in there too?
And Facebook's a little bit better. I mean, it is a little bit better because you have I guess, a little better conversations, but you still get that like, you might as well unfriend me now sort of element of things. So it's all social media when you're
This
texting.
is the problem with trying to, I'm talking to a screen. You might as well be on the space station,
right? Yeah,
for all the connection we're making.
I might be on the space station.
And you might, which is weird because then the call would be coming from inside the house because I am too. No, this is the ultimate metaphor for it's just my brain to your brain.
Yeah.
Because this picture is just a simulation of me, which is kind of like what philosophers and sci-fi writers say about the human form anyway. So it all gets into that whole thing of like, it's just my brain to your brain or my soul to your soul. And this is the closest we can get. And we're thousands of miles away, but technology allows us to do this, but there's always something missing,
Yeah. It was different. Like when I was watching you speak in Comic-Con, I could feel the energy there. I can't feel any energy from you here.
Exactly.
It's a different deal. Yeah.
And then that goes back to what I was, only half joking when I talked about the energy of people and the collective energy that maybe you can focus on that. And of course, everybody takes that and runs with it and comes down the mountaintop with either a new religion or a new theory on stones and symbols and massages or whatever. So you take it what you will, but I think no matter what, the bottom line is that we are just all little packages of energy, and we have a lot of influence over whether it's positive or negative. And for some reason, getting into digital connections allows people to reinforce their goods. They try to be good and put out the positive, or they just run wild with the negative. If you vote for that candidate, I'm your enemy, and I will get 150 people over here to ratio you and teach you a lesson. Try to send you to bed crying tonight is our mission. So, that's just what's in their brain, and you're getting it unfiltered.
It sucks.
Here's my dirt. But as a writer, you're trying to do the same thing to paper. I'm trying to get that experience onto paper and use language.
Right.
And try to communicate concepts and ideas. And if I do it well, then it actually moves the buttons on your emotions. Like you said, you can read something and get creeped out or feel empathy for a fictional character. So there's a magical side to it if it's used right. And it's our job as writers to know how to do that.
I guess the last couple of writing questions, somebody asked me, a viewer was, are there Marvel and DC properties you're interested in working on at this point? I think you're pretty solidly doing your own thing, which I like, but I'll let you answer that. I shouldn't put words in your mouth. Sorry.
It's nice that people ask that. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's two that I think I should write. One that I think I wish I could have written Supergirl, because I always thought.
Me too, Terry.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the whole universe knows that's true. It just would have been good. But I always thought she should, if there were only 3 DC characters on a poster, she should be one of them, and she never was. She was always treated like a sidekick, like Krypto. And it's not fair because she was just as powerful as Superman.
Right. And I'm on the same page. And that's actually one of the ones I would like to write in the same thing. And I've read through all of Supergirl pretty much from Otto Binder's original stuff to recent. And really, there's a weirdness there that like they really just feel like they don't know what to do with her, and they just cycle through writers, and one guy might have her do something else, some gal might have her do something else, and it doesn't feel like the same character from like even one trade to one trade. Just really sadly made character. Yeah,
never a real person. She never had a best friend. She never had a group of friends. She never went out for drinks or dinner. I never saw her.
Then they try to shoehorn her into, here's Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen. It's like that's not her deal.
I have never seen her do the dishes or take a shower or go to the bathroom or go to have a drink somewhere with a friend. I've never even seen her have a best friend.
I did in Peter David's version, which was not actually.
I love Peter's. I love Peter's old classic Supergirl, wondering what was going on.
Yeah, that was neat.
Okay, the flip side. I really should have written some Batman, because I absolutely hate Batman. And Batman is a masochist. So he would love it if the whole point of Batman is how much can you make him suffer? And I think of endless ways to make him suffer. And I actually told, what was his name? Alex Alonso, whoever the group editor was on the Batman family at one point. I was next to him in a green room and I pitched this to him. I said, Alex, I need to be the writing Batman. He said, what? Because I hate him. And I could make all these stories, and in my stories, the Joker will actually get some traction going, instead of like he only gets this far and stop this far. And Alex looked at me like I was the crazy person in the room. He moved away. But you can't admire Batman and write Batman. You have to have a different attitude to write a character like that, because a lot of suffering with that character, and if you admire him, if you worship Batman, you shouldn't go nowhere near the creative team. The creative team cannot worship Batman and create him at the same time.
And unless you have the idea that maybe you kind of go Adam Westy with it,
That's a different world. That planet has sailed. That planet is gone.
It's gone.
It's not even in the solar system anymore. That's
Andrew,
another planet.
Strangers in Paradise got me into indie comics. Much love to Terry Moore. So
thank you. It got me into indie comics too.
Yeah, right. Nice. And then I've always been curious because you in that Comic-Con talk, you were talking about doing a Strangers in Paradise novel, and I think you actually wrote one at some point. And I know this is something you've always been toying with, also. So what's your deal with prose, and is it happening?
I put a lot of prose in Strangers in Paradise just to get people to think of me as, oh yeah, he can if he wants to. I was auditioning and practicing and everything else. So when I say I want to write a novel, at least nobody laughs, but I found that it's really hard for me to do it while I'm working on deadline, and I've been on deadline since 1993. So it's just one book after another.
Yeah,
I don't think I can get the novel done until I get off the comic book artist deadline wheel, because it's just, I can write quickly, but the drawing takes forever.
Right.
So I'm barely making my deadlines. And
do you full script yourself, like writing wise, or do you kind of just?
I used to.
Okay.
But then I would sit down to the first blank page, and I had written all this. But then when I sit down and I start drawing the first panel, I think, well, what if he's wearing a jacket? Why is he wearing a jacket? Well, because of the da-da-da. And then next thing you know, by the time I get down here, I've changed the whole story in my mind as a cartoonist. I think while I draw, and I write while I draw. And I would get off script, and I had wasted all that time writing the script. So now what I do is I make an outline. And then if I get into a tricky situation where it's a dialogue that has to be really on the spot, I will write the dialogue out in final draft or something. And I do that. No, I don't come up with an Alan Moore script anymore, because when I sit down to draw it, I'm still editing. Drawing is my second draft, and I've just started over too many times.
Nice. Well, I think we're a little over an hour, and I want you to get back to work because I need more books. So everybody, I hope you check out Ever. And we touched on the Zoe book that's going to be coming out. It's called Serial. Let's see, Serial Terry Moore, and I'm a super professional YouTuber, as you can tell.
It came up in a Google search.
Yeah, came up on a Google search. So this is what you're working on currently?
Yes. This is what's on my table now, and it comes out in January, and it'll be a 10-issue series, like you said, coming out on a regular basis for 2021. I'm looking forward.
That's the other thing. You can pre-subscribe to that on your website. So you can go store.
If you go to home, you're all right. Yes.
Home. Oh, there it is. Serial. And then you got 10 issue subscription right here. I do the single issues. I'm that type of guy who buys your single issues and then buys the hardcover afterwards. So I buy them through my local comic shop just because I I want to give them money. No offense, but I'll definitely buy the hardcover from you when that rack's on there too. So cool. All right.
Well, I appreciate that. That's the best of both worlds for me. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Got it. I try to impress everybody on here. Please support indie comics because indie comics really thrive 100% on readership. These are not properties that big movie studios own, and they just don't even. They're churning through whoever. This is somebody's livelihood every single time, and they're putting their heart and soul into this and just trying to get noticed every single time. Even somebody like Terry, who's like one of the bigger indie artists out there, like it is the case. So that's, yes, I think I liked it. That's my last final thought. Yeah.
That's a good one. And that's actually on my mind every single day. And it's one of the reasons why I remain grateful to be able to do this after all this time still. I'm so grateful to be able to write and draw stories. And so I'm very appreciative to anybody who buys the book. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Have a good day. Thanks for coming on, Terry. And we will be back probably next week. I think I've got Sixth, who's got his Napalm Brothers Indiegogo coming on. And then I think Brian Niemeyer's got a new mech novel coming, and he wants to come talk about that too. So I'll see you guys soon.